the home base for RMG and for the rest of this training is rmg.mit.edu. So I'll put this into the chat as well for those of you joining us online, but go ahead and head to this website and we'll get underway with the install. For those of you who already have it installed, consider following along anyway, because we might point out something that you've not seen before, but rmg.mit.edu will definitely have navigating and using this website in greater detail in the future. But again, this is your starting point for all things RMG. So you can see on the left there some quick navigators to get to other important parts. But then right in the center here, we have a link to the download and installation instructions for the current version of RMG, which is 3.2.0. So you'll follow that link. And I saw the message. The recommended computer requirements. Okay. I'll answer that question while we're running a download, Antonio. So these are the installation instructions, and right at the top here we have the recommended set. We call these the recommended because this is generally the most straightforward. This should work for everyone, and for most people this should be enough for your use case. If you want to install RMG on a remote computing resource, if you're using like a high performance computer, or you have a non-standard operating system, something other than regular Ubuntu or Windows or Mac OS, maybe consider attending the lecture at the end of today where we'll talk about a more advanced installation. But again, this should be sufficient for everyone. The first link here will take you to Docker. So follow their instructions for how to get Docker installed based on your appropriate operating system. So for me, I'm on Windows right now. A lot of you are probably also on Windows. So you'll follow Docker Desktop for Windows, and then click on the appropriate link. You can also get it from the Microsoft Store, which is probably the easiest way. But while you're doing that, I'll answer the previous question and make a quick comment that the reason that we use Docker rather than some alternative installation method like you might be familiar with for Cantera or Chemkin, behind the scenes, RMG's installation process is pretty involved. So what Docker allows us to do is follow the 10-step or so procedure required to make RMG work exactly one time. And then Docker captures an image of the result of following those instructions. And then we pass that image to you so that you can run it on your computer directly from where we left off. So it avoids you having to deal with a lot of the technical problems of getting the installation up and running, so you can just hit the ground going. So while you're installing that, I'll answer Antonio's question, which is very important. Yeah. What are the recommended computer requirements to run a simulation? Specifically mentioning, I'm running a coal combustion, and after 5 days, my simulation stopped suddenly. So I'll answer those in two parts here. For running a basic RMG simulation, you can get yourself well stuck into RMG with just a basic laptop. You don't need a ton of memory, 16 gigabytes of memory, something standard like that, any CPU. RMG doesn't use GPUs or any special accelerators, so whatever you have now is certainly enough to at least get started with RMG and start running our example mechanisms and maybe dig into something more complicated. If you are getting to the scale, like was mentioned in the second part, where you have something that's running for multiple days, RMG will use as much resources as you give it access to. So as Richard was mentioning in the first part, as Richard was mentioning in the first part, there's a complex interplay between how you set your parameters for the system, how you tune your tolerances, things like that, and how big your mechanism is going to be. And when you add in the fact that our computers aren't arbitrarily large, that can complicate things a little bit further. But yeah, so I will say that most of the published RMG mechanisms that have come out of the Green Group have been run on machines with up to maybe 128 gigabytes of memory or less. Lately, as we've been pushing into larger and larger mechanisms, we've tried larger memory amounts. But again, just to reiterate, you can get very stuck in with RMG without needing a ton of memory. Uh, and I'll add too, and we'll talk about this at the developer uh, session right at the end of the training. We're working on improving the memory situation too, so hopefully you can run larger mechanisms. All right, so some of you might still have Docker installing. That's okay. The installation instructions will still be here when you get back. But the next step will be running this command linked on the documentation. So Docker pull. Docker is our software that we just installed. Pull indicates that you're grabbing the image that we just have uploaded for you to use. And then this is the actual name of the image. So reaction mechanism generator, RMG, and then this is the version number. So, question?
Are we going to recommend people do 3.2 or latest, which
because the instructions for running it and so on the website currently describe how to use the latest.
Yeah.
So
to answer that question, I'll take us to where the Docker images, what you're actually downloading, where they're stored. So this is Docker Hub, which is just a giant list of all of the possible images that you can download. And here's where RMG lives. So you can see that we're a sponsored open source organization. We've been vetted by Docker, so we believe that we're secure. So please trust us there. But to answer the actual question, the tags, this is a list of all of the versions of RMG that are currently available on Docker. So version 3.2 is what the documentation currently pushes you towards. That was our last stable, verified release where we made sure everything was nice and pretty. But that's about 2 years old. So we are going to be somewhere in the relatively near term, which is a super loaded word, going to be releasing a new version that will reflect the past couple of years of updates. But the nice thing is that Docker makes it really easy to download multiple versions at the same time. So I'll suggest to start with, run this command as shown, RMG 3.2.0. And the alternative, which I will run in live time, just for fun, is to install the latest version. So that tag you can see here, this is going to be pushed basically every morning at like 7 in the morning. It's rebuilt every day based on the absolute bleeding edge RMG. Whatever we pushed last night gets made available in the latest release. If you are looking to use some functionality in RMG, which has not yet been released into a formal numbered version, you can try using the latest branch. It's not perfect. We won't promise that it's absolutely perfect. We won't promise that anything is absolutely perfect, but 3.2.0 we know is pretty clean. Latest, it might be a little bit more sharp edges, but again, we're going to be hopefully releasing a new version soon, so you can get to it all much easier. So here I am. I'm going to run Docker pull, and I'm going to run latest.
done this before?
Yes, I have. Yeah, and I actually have to start Docker, which I did not have running.
Question.
Yeah, while this is running. Yeah.
Sorry, it's a short question, but how many gigs of data do you think are stored on Docker Hub of RMG images?
So we can actually count. The latest version is 3.5, and that gets replaced every morning.
And I don't think every morning's is saved. I don't think you can get yesterday's or the day before or last week's.
No, that's not true.
It's not 3 gigs per day. It's just 3 gigs replaced every day.
That's right. Yeah. So you can see the historical versions here as well. Not all of them are available, but many of them are. And they should all work basically the same way. So let's see, I should be able to run Docker now. Okay. Well, my Docker's not working, which is appropriate, but that's what I get for trying to do a live demo. I see a question in the chat. We'll circle back to that in a later session. So great. So hopefully at this point, everyone has installed Docker, got it running, and been able to pull Reaction Mechanism Generator 3.2 or latest, depending on your preference. So step 3, the final step, in order to actually get things going, is to run this command. So I will paste this into my terminal, and then we'll break down what it actually represents. See if I can make this bigger. That's folly. Okay, never mind. It's a terrible idea. I'll do it here. Again, so the name of the software, run in this case, indicates that we've already pulled the image that we want. So now we're going to try to run it. This RMG container name little piece of the syntax is part of what Docker uses to manage the images that you have. So they make a distinction in between a image and a container. An image is just a pre-executed set of instructions, the installation instructions that we've already done. And then the container is basically the virtual machine that actually holds that image so that you can interact with it. You can only have one container of every name, but they persist in between sessions. So you can start running RMG in RMG container. You can disconnect from it, and it will free up all of your computer's resources. And then you can reconnect to it at any point in the future. You can have multiple containers with different names. So I have like RMG container 1 and 2 and final for real and all those kind of things. So you can have as many as you want, as many of you as disk space for. Super helpful if you have like multiple projects ongoing, or if you want to make edits to RMG, things like that. Because again, they're all separated, they're all containerized, so they don't interact with each other. The annoying thing about having a completely containerized operating system is that you can't get to the files very easily. So Docker, of course, has a way to deal with that. It's this part of the command here, -v, and then this little pile of code spaghetti. This link is some folder that's on your computer. So we're pretending here that I'm on Windows. I go to the user folder. My username is RMG user because I'm very dedicated. And I have a folder called my RMG files. So you're going to want to change this to be some folder that exists on your computer. So as you're working with RMG and you're writing your own input files to run mechanism generation, you can put them into this folder on your computer, and then they'll be accessible in this folder on the right inside of the container. So you can change this, my RMG files, if you'd like, or you can just leave it as is and it'll show exactly as is there. The one way that from within the container to your operating system, you can modify files. So if you change an input file inside the Docker container, that will be reflected in your operating system on your computer and vice versa. So that's how we feed data into and out of RMG. Okay, and we have our first error. So Emmanuel will check that in a moment. The last part of the command here, IT reaction mechanism generator, this just says attach an interactive terminal, and then this is the name of the command, the name of the image you want to run. So if you want to run 3.1.1 or latest or ElectroCat or whatever version, just change out this 3.2.0. So before we move on to debugging for the next 13 minutes formally, and then I'll stay on during the break as well, some hints and suggestions about using Docker with RMG. We have put some high-level how to use RMG with Docker in the documentation here. So there's instructions on how to run Jupyter notebooks. There's instructions on how to reattach to an existing container with a given name. But there's arbitrarily more complicated things that you could want to do. Maybe you want to limit how many CPUs it has or how much RAM it has access to. What I will point you towards is the Docker documentation, first and foremost. The Docker documentation is very detailed about how to control all the different parts of the behavior, how to do anything you want. And then actually, if you like language model tools, ChatGPT and whatever, they're pretty helpful at managing containers like this. So if your question is, how do I tell Docker to use exact CPUs and 10 gigabytes of memory, you can find it in the documentation or search online, and it can help you figure it out. There's a little bit of a learning curve for Docker, but we've moved this way, and believe it or not, it's simpler than the previous installation method. In historical precedent, the first day of the RMG training used to be installation day instead of installation hour. So we're happy with the progress that's been made there. So with that said, we're gonna start debugging some individual user errors.
Can I just
Yeah.
add a comment that I personally, and most people in my group, and I'm guessing other people, once you start using RMG a lot for real, and in fact you decided this is a 2-year project, not a 1-day workshop, you want to be running it on a cluster, on a supercomputer, on something where you can fire up 10 different and running for 2 weeks, right? You don't do that on your laptop. And then I personally don't use Docker. I don't know if anyone else does. And so it maybe is worth pointing out that there is another alternate installation method that's worth learning. We're right that for a workshop where you want to get it installed in 10 minutes, Docker is the way to go. But do notice that the other non-Docker way of installing it is worth learning if you're trying to run this more permanently on a cluster or something. And that currently, the only alternative is to use Anaconda to get all your dependencies and environment, and then build RMG from source code from GitHub. But those instructions, we also maintain those instructions, and it should, as you said, it's like 10 steps. You've got to follow it carefully, but we keep that working, and that's my recommended way to install it.
Which actually, thank you for mentioning that, Richard. I will briefly go over that. We're going to go through this method as well as like how to contribute to RMG, some basic mechanics of like GitHub at the end of the day today. But in case you can't make it, or if you do want to just at least know where this is, from that same page, if you just scroll down a little bit, we have what we call the developer install. Historically, we've suggested that developers install it this way, and then users install Docker, but of course, feel free to do whichever works better for your setup. This 3.2.1 installation by source using Anaconda environment for Unix-based systems. This is our suggested install there. Note that we do suggest Linux or Mac and not Windows. It has historically been difficult to develop RMG on Windows directly. Yeah.
Subsystem Linux is a great
way to do that.
run.
Yeah.
And if you have a Windows machine, use Windows subsystem, and that works fine for you.
Yeah, so that terminology for everyone else, this is WSL is the thing, but it's basically a miniature Linux operating system running inside of Windows. So if you do really want to develop on Windows, that's probably your best path forward. But yeah, these are the full installation instructions for the developer install of RMG. So you'll notice, yes, it's a lot more involved. First thing you have to do is install a package manager, then install a bunch of operating system level dependencies like Git and some compilers. From there, we require that you clone the repositories, manually create the environment, and compile RMG. And then the installation instructions right now, and again, we'll dig into this in greater detail during the 4:30 meeting. The installation instructions right now are a bit ahead of what's in the Docker container, pending a version release, but there are some optional steps at the end, which, as described, can enable or disable some different features with their respective pros and cons.